Hello, this contribution is scientific work from the European Conference on Modeling Foundations and Applications. The title of the paper is Assembling Scenario Patterns for Checking Model Behavior. It is common work by Nisha Desai and Martin Gogolla. The problem that we have dealt with are behavioral model properties. Model validation and verification are crucial tasks in model-driven software engineering. For verifying and for checking behavioral model properties, it is typical to consider dynamic scenarios, or in other words, operation call sequences. However, it is a challenging task to identify the, in quotes, proper dynamic scenarios and to answer which operation call sequences, which dynamic scenarios have to be considered. The aim of this work is to provide suggestions for operation call sequences with different call orders and different call frequencies. The contribution of this paper is to propose a catalog of so-called scenario patterns. We want to give advice and guidelines for constructing dynamic scenarios. We do this by proposing this catalog of scenario patterns. A scenario pattern may be regarded as a general template that is applicable in concrete modeling situations. The catalog is explained by stating the pattern nature and the pattern purpose and by a collection of example models. We validate our pattern catalog through a study with UML and OCL experts. The central notion, dynamic scenario, in our context, we have a given class model, we have given invariants, and for the dynamic part, for the operations, we have pre and post conditions. Then a dynamic scenario is a sequence of object models so that one object model is reachable from the next to the next object model by an operation call, and all the object models ideally satisfy the invariants, and the operation calls satisfy the operation contracts, the preconditions, and the postconditions. So, in essence, the dynamic scenario is a starting object model and some operation calls. Our pattern catalog consists of 11 patterns. We will discuss 2 patterns in some more detail here. For example, the pattern init to fin is a pattern where we construct call sequences that lead from an initial to a final condition or state. And for example, the conditions may be specified in OCL. The pattern pair is a pattern that considers whether all pairs of operations occurring in the model are executable or not, and we will have a closer look at this pattern. The example that we have studied is a very simple example with only one class, one associations, and 3 operations that are non-query operations. And the pair pattern now systematically proposes to test whether operation pairs, here you have a first operation and then here you have a second operation, whether these all pairs of operations are executable or not executable. So you see here that the marry and then the diverse operation, that this is an executable dynamic behavior, whereas when you have first a marry and then you want to execute a second marry, that this is not an executable scenario, not an allowed operation call sequence. We have validated our approach with a study that we have done with UML and OCL experts. We have worked with 11 subjects that are experts in UML and OCL that work partly in industry, partly at the university. The study took place in two rounds, round 1 and round 2. In round 1, we have presented to the subjects a larger example and a class diagram with operations and operation implementations, and we have asked them to develop dynamic scenarios for this class diagram in order to achieve a better quality of the implementation. And in the second round, we have presented to the subjects our catalog of scenario patterns, and I've asked them to apply these catalog of scenario patterns to construct new scenarios, and we have asked them whether they have already used some patterns in round 1. The overall result was quite convincing. We were satisfied with the results. In particular, we learned that in the second round, some particular patterns, namely the ones that we have marked over here, were used quite a number of times. For the first time by the subjects. The subjects were not aware that these patterns existed, and they were applying these patterns in this second round. So the pattern catalog was quite well accepted by them. We have presented here a catalog of scenario patterns that can be applied to UML and OCL models for developing behavioral scenarios in order to check dynamic model properties. In the catalog, we have described the nature and the purpose of the scenario patterns, and we have validated our approach through a study with UML and OCL experts. As future work, we want to apply our catalog to other approaches that also check dynamic model properties. We want to provide support on the technical level for particular patterns. For example, the pattern init to fin could be automated in a tool by specifying initial and final OCL conditions. And we want to provide more support for determining the pattern application to particular models or model fragments in the model that is currently under development. Thanks for your attention.